The arrival. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the small town of Millbrook, Arizona. Sheriff Sarah Reeves wiped the sweat from her brow as she stepped out of her cruiser, squinting at the shimmering heat waves rising from the asphalt. It was just another scorching day in the desert, or so she thought. A crackling voice came through her radio. "Sheriff, we've got reports of a strange object in the sky over Johnson's farm. Probably nothing, but could you check it out?" Sarah sighed, reaching for her hat. "Copy that. Dispatch. I'm on my way." As she drove towards the outskirts of town, a glint in the sky caught her eye. At first, she dismissed it as a reflection, but as she drew closer to Johnson's farm, the object became unmistakable. A massive silver disk hovered silently above the cornfields, its surface rippling like mercury in the sunlight. "Well, I'll be damned," Sarah muttered, pulling over to the side of the road. She grabbed her binoculars from the glove compartment and stepped out of the car, her heart racing as she focused on the otherworldly craft. Suddenly, a beam of light shot down from the disk, touching the ground in the middle of the cornfield. Sarah watched in awe as three tall, slender figures descended through the beam, their bodies covered in what looked like shimmering, liquid metal armor. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her holster, but she hesitated. These beings, whatever they were, hadn't shown any signs of hostility. Taking a deep breath, she decided to approach cautiously. As she made her way through the corn, the aliens turned towards her. Their faces were featureless save for two large, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Sarah raised her hands, palms out, in a universal gesture of peace. "Welcome to Earth," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Sheriff Sarah Reeves. We mean you no harm." The aliens tilted their heads in unison, as if considering her words. Then, to Sarah's amazement, one of them spoke. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a melodic series of tones that somehow formed words in her mind. "Greetings, Sheriff Sarah Reeves of Earth. We are the Zorax, explorers from a distant star. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship." Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Well, that's a relief. I have to say, you've caused quite a stir around here. Would you mind telling me more about why you've come to our planet?" As the alien began to explain, Sarah noticed something strange. Tiny droplets of sweat had formed on her palms in the intense heat, and as she gestured, one of these droplets flew off her hand and landed on the nearest alien's armor. To her shock, the armor began to sizzle and smoke where the sweat had landed. The alien let out a high-pitched keen, stumbling backward. Its companions moved protectively in front of it, their postures suddenly tense and defensive. "Wait," Sarah called out, realizing the gravity of the situation. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to harm you." But the damage was done. The aliens began to retreat towards their ship, their movements jerky and agitated. Sarah could see that the affected alien's armor was still reacting, spreading outward from the point of contact like a ripple in a pond. As the aliens ascended back into their craft, Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, we're getting reports of similar craft appearing all over the globe. What's going on out there?" Sarah watched as the disk rose higher into the sky, her mind reeling from the implications of what had just happened. "Dispatch, you're not going to believe this, but we've just made first contact. And I think I might have accidentally started an interstellar incident." As the alien ship disappeared into the clouds, Sarah knew that nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had taken its first steps onto the galactic stage, and those steps had been anything but smooth. In the days that followed, reports flooded in from around the world. Alien craft had appeared over major cities and remote locations alike. Initial contacts had been peaceful, but tensions were rising as news of the sweat incident spread. Scientists scrambled to understand the phenomenon, theorizing that something in human perspiration was corrosive to the aliens' technology. World leaders debated how to proceed, torn between extending an olive branch and preparing for potential conflict. As for Sarah, She found herself at the center of a media storm. Her account of the encounter was broadcast worldwide, analyzed and debated by experts and armchair theorists alike. She couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Had her accidental discovery doomed humanity's first extraterrestrial relationship, or had it provided them with a crucial advantage? One thing was certain: the arrival of the Orcs had changed everything. As humanity grappled with the reality of not being alone in the universe, Sarah Reeves stood at the forefront of a new era. An era where the simplest things, like human sweat, could have profound implications for the future of interstellar relations. As the sun set on that fateful day, casting long shadows across the cornfields of Millbrook, Sarah looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the Orcs were undoubtedly planning their next move. And down here on Earth, humanity was doing the same. The cosmic chess game had begun, and the fate of two species hung in the balance, all because of one tiny drop of sweat on a hot summer day in Arizona. Circular table, their faces grim as they discussed the alien situation. At the center of it all stood Sheriff Sarah Reeves, still struggling to comprehend how she'd gone from small-town law enforcement to the focal point of humanity's first extraterrestrial crisis. Sheriff Reeves, the UN Secretary General, addressed her. "Please recount your experience with the aliens one more time. We need to understand every detail if we're to formulate a response." Sarah took a deep breath and began her story again. As she spoke, she could see the mix of fear, fascination, and determination on the faces around her. When she finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. The U.S. President was the first to break it. "So our sweat is harmful to their armor. That's unexpected, to say the least. But it could be our best defense if things go south." "With all due respect, Mr. President," the Chinese representative interjected, "we cannot base our entire strategy on perspiration. We need a more concrete plan." As the debate heated up, Dr. Eliza Chen, the lead scientist assigned to study the alien technology, cleared her throat. All eyes turned to her. "If I may," she began, her voice steady despite the pressure, "our preliminary studies on the sample of alien material we obtained are yielding interesting results. The molecular structure of their armor is unlike anything we've seen before. It seems to be a form of programmable matter, capable of adapting to various conditions. However, something in human sweat, we believe it's a combination of specific enzymes and electrolytes, causes a cascading breakdown in its structure." The room erupted in murmurs. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. "So, what does this mean for us, Dr. Chen?" Dr. Chen's eyes gleamed with excitement. "It means we might be able to develop a synthetic compound based on human sweat that could be used as a weapon or a deterrent against the aliens. But more importantly, it gives us insight into their biology and technology. They're clearly not adapted to Earth's conditions, which could work to our advantage." The Russian representative scoffed. "That's all very interesting, but while we sit here theorizing, the aliens could be planning an attack. We should strike first, use this weakness against them before they find a way to counteract it." "No," Sarah found herself saying, surprising even herself with her vehemence. All eyes turned to her. "I was there. I saw their reaction. They were as surprised by the sweat effect as we were. If they meant us harm, they could have attacked already. I think they're as scared of us as we are of them." The room fell silent again, weighing her words. The Secretary General nodded slowly. "Sheriff Reeves makes a valid point. We need to approach this situation with caution, but also with an open mind. Dr. Chen, how quickly can you develop this synthetic compound? With a global collaborative effort, we could have a prototype within a week." Dr. Chen replied. "Make it happen," the Secretary General ordered. "In the meantime, we need to establish communication with the Orcs. We need to understand their intentions." As the meeting adjourned, Sarah found herself pulled aside by Dr. Chen. "Sheriff, I was wondering if you'd be willing to assist us in our research. Your first-hand experience with the aliens could be invaluable." Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of trepidation and determination. Of course, Doctor. Whatever I can do to help. Over the next few days, Sarah split her time between the lab and briefing military strategists. The world held its breath, watching the skies for any sign of alien activity. The Zorax ships remained in orbit, silent and inscrutable. In labs across the globe, scientists worked around the clock, analyzing the alien material and synthesizing compounds based on human sweat. Military forces were on high alert, and civilians alternated between panic and fascination. 5 days after the initial encounter, Dr. Chen burst into the makeshift command center where Sarah was discussing defense strategies with military brass. "We've done it," she announced, breathless with excitement. "We've synthesized a compound that replicates the effect of human sweat on the alien armor, and we've managed to weaponize it." She held up a small, sleek canister. "This aerosol spray contains the compound. In theory, it should be effective against their technology without causing harm to humans." The generals leaned in, their eyes gleaming with interest. But before anyone could speak, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. A young lieutenant burst into the room, his face pale. "Sirs, ma'am," he stammered, "we're detecting massive energy surges from the alien ships. They're powering up weapon systems." The room erupted into chaos. Orders were shouted, strategies hastily revised. In the midst of it all, Sarah caught Dr. Chen's eye. They shared a look of understanding. This was it, the moment that would define humanity's future. As they rushed to implement their defense plans, Sarah couldn't help but think back to that hot day in Millbrook. How could she have known that a single drop of sweat would lead to this? Now that same sweat might be the key to humanity's survival. Outside, the sky darkened as the massive Zorax ships descended through the atmosphere. The air crackled with tension and the hum of alien technology. Humanity stood on the brink, armed with determination, ingenuity, and the most unlikely weapon imaginable, the essence of their own perspiration. As the first alien ship broke through the cloud cover, its hull gleaming ominously in the sunlight, Sarah Reeves squared her shoulders. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it head-on. They had come too far, survived too much, to back down now. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and sweat would be their secret weapon. Sweat and strategy. The sky burned with an otherworldly light as the Zorax ships descended upon Earth's major cities. In Washington, D.C., Sheriff Sarah Reeves stood atop the Pentagon, her heart racing as she watched the massive alien vessels approach. Beside her, Dr. Eliza Chen clutched a case containing their newly developed weapon, canisters of synthesized human sweat compound. "I hope this works," Sarah muttered, her eyes fixed on the approaching ships. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "It has to." Suddenly, the air crackled with energy. Beams of searing light shot from the alien ships, carving glowing paths through the sky. But they weren't aimed at the ground. Instead, they targeted military installations, communication centers, and power grids. "They're trying to cripple our infrastructure," a nearby general growled. "Smart move." Sarah's radio crackled to life with reports from around the globe. The pattern was the same everywhere. Precision strikes against key targets, but no direct attacks on civilian populations. It was almost as if the Zorax were trying to disable rather than destroy. "We need to act now," Sarah said, turning to the assembled military leaders. "While we still can." The order was given. Around the world, Earth's military forces sprang into action. Fighter jets screamed into the sky, their pilots armed with specially modified missiles containing the sweat compound. Ground forces moved into position, equipped with aerosol canisters and spray guns filled with the synthesized substance. As the battle unfolded, it quickly became apparent that conventional weapons were useless against the Zorax ships. Missiles bounced off their hulls, and bullets seemed to disappear into their shimmering armor without effect. But when the first sweat compound missile found its mark, the effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Where the compound touched the alien ship, Its surface began to bubble and dissolve, like ice under a blowtorch. The ship listed to one side, its perfect symmetry disrupted by a gaping hole in its hull. A cheer went up from the human forces, quickly echoed around the world as similar reports came in. But the Zoraks were quick to adapt. Their ships began to move erratically, making it difficult for the human forces to land direct hits, and where the compound had struck, the aliens seemed to be regenerating their armor, albeit slowly. "We need to press our advantage," the general beside Sarah barked into his comm. "All units, concentrate fire on the affected areas." As the battle raged on, Sarah noticed something strange. Despite the damage they were taking, the Zorak ships weren't retaliating with full force. Their energy weapons continued to target infrastructure, but they seemed to be deliberately avoiding populated areas. "They're still not trying to kill us," Sarah realized aloud. "Even now, they're holding back." Dr. Chen looked at her sharply. "What are you thinking, Sheriff?" Before Sarah could respond, a deafening boom shook the air. One of the Zorak ships, its hull pockmarked with dissolving craters, was descending rapidly towards the National Mall. As it fell, a strange, keening cry filled the air, a sound of distress that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the brain. "They're going down," the general said, a note of triumph in his voice. "We've got them on the run." But Sarah felt a twist in her gut. Something wasn't right. Acting on instinct, she grabbed a canister of the sweat compound and a megaphone. "I need to get down there," she said. "Are you insane?" Dr. Chen exclaimed. "It's not safe." "Trust me," Sarah replied, already moving towards the exit. "I've got a hunch." Minutes later, Sarah found herself racing across the mall towards the downed alien ship. Smoke billowed from its hull, and that strange, mournful cry continued to echo across the city. As she approached, a hatch in the side of the ship began to open. Sarah raised her megaphone. "This is Sheriff Sarah Reeves," she called out, her voice amplified across the battlefield. "I was the first human to make contact with your species. I'm approaching alone and unarmed. I want to talk." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, 3 figures emerged from the ship. Their liquid metal armor was pitted and scarred, barely holding together in some places. But it was their eyes that caught Sarah's attention. No longer shimmering with inner light, they now seemed dull and filled with what she could only describe as pain. "Why?" The word resonated in Sarah's mind, filled with confusion and anguish. "Why do you attack?" "We came in peace." Sarah lowered the megaphone, her suspicions confirmed. "I could ask you the same thing," she said, loud enough for them to hear. "You fired first." The aliens seemed to confer among themselves, their movements agitated. Finally, the one in the center spoke again. "Misunderstanding. Great misunderstanding. Our scans detected weapons of mass destruction on your planet. Protocol dictated neutralizing threat before initiating peaceful contact. But we did not wish to harm living beings." Sarah's mind raced. Their actions suddenly made sense. The precision strikes against military targets, the avoidance of civilian areas. "So you were trying to disarm us, not destroy us," she said slowly. "Yes," the alien replied. "But your attack, our armor, our technology, it dissolves. Causes great pain. Why? How?" Sarah held up the canister. It's based on our sweat, the moisture our bodies produce to cool down. We didn't know it would hurt you until our first contact." The aliens recoiled slightly at the sight of the canister. "Your natural excretions are a weapon," one of them said, a note of awe and fear in its mental voice. "Not intentionally," Sarah replied. "Look, I think we've both made some big mistakes here, but I believe we can still fix this. You say you came in peace. Prove it. Stand down your forces. Let's talk this out before we destroy each other over a misunderstanding." There was a long moment of silence. Sarah could hear the sounds of battle in the distance, the fate of 2 species hanging in the balance. Finally, The lead alien stepped forward. "We will stand down," it said. "You are right. Too much has been lost to misunderstanding. We wish to speak with your leaders." Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you," she said. "I promise. We'll sort this out." As she reached for her radio to relay the news, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. A galactic conflict, averted by sweat, and a willingness to communicate. It was almost too ridiculous to believe. But then again, she thought, glancing at the aliens as they began to power down their ship, the universe was probably full of things too ridiculous to believe, and humanity had just taken its first, stumbling steps into that vast, strange cosmos. Whatever came next, it was sure to be one hell of a ride. Understanding and cooperation. The days following the battle were a whirlwind of activity. The image of Sheriff Sarah Reeves standing beside the Zorax representatives on the steps of the United Nations headquarters had been broadcast around the world, becoming an instant icon of the new era humanity had entered. Now Sarah found herself in a state-of-the-art laboratory, watching as Dr. Eliza Chen and a team of international scientists worked alongside their Zorax counterparts. The room was filled with a mix of cutting-edge human technology and alien devices that seemed to defy the laws of physics as humans understood them. "It's fascinating," Dr. Chen said, looking up from a microscope. "The Zorax body chemistry is silicon-based rather than carbon-based like ours. That's why our sweat affects them so dramatically. The enzymes in our perspiration catalyze a reaction that breaks down their cellular structure. And a little terrifying, I'd imagine," Sarah said with a wry smile. "Indeed," Zalek agreed, "but also inspiring. We believe we have much to learn from each other." As if to emphasize his point, another Zorax scientist called out in its melodious language. Dr. Chen rushed over, her eyes widening as she looked at a holographic display. "This is incredible," she breathed. "The Zorax have developed a method to synthesize complex organic molecules using programmable matter. Do you understand what this means? We could potentially cure diseases, repair damaged organs, even regrow limbs." Sarah felt a surge of hope. This was why she had pushed so hard for cooperation rather than continued conflict. The potential benefits of working together far outweighed the risks. Over the next few weeks, breakthroughs came at an astonishing pace. The Zorax shared their advanced knowledge of physics and material science, while human scientists helped the aliens develop defenses against the harsh, to them, Earth environment. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Cultural misunderstandings abounded, and there were still those on both sides who viewed the other with suspicion and fear. Sarah often found herself playing the role of mediator, drawing on her experience as a small-town sheriff to smooth over conflicts and build trust. One afternoon, as she was leaving a particularly tense meeting between human and Zorax representatives, she encountered Zalek in the hallway. "Sheriff Reeves," he greeted her, his mental voice tinged with what she had learned to interpret as concern. "You seem troubled." Sarah sighed. "Just frustrated. We've come so far, but there's still so much mistrust. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever truly understand each other." Zalek was quiet for a moment, then said, "Perhaps understanding is not the goal. Perhaps acceptance is enough." Sarah looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "In our travels, we have encountered many species, many cultures. No two are ever truly alike. But the greatest alliances, the most fruitful cooperations, come not from perfect understanding, but from a willingness to accept and value our differences." As Sarah pondered his words, an alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Red lights flashed, and a computerized voice announced, "Containment breach in Lab 7. All personnel evacuate immediately." Without hesitation, Sarah and Zalek rushed towards the source of the alarm. They arrived to find chaos, scientists fleeing the lab, and a strange, shimmering mist filling the air. "What happened?" Sarah demanded, grabbing a passing researcher. "The atmospheric regulator for the Zorax environment." The scientist gasped. It malfunctioned. The air in there is now toxic to humans. But the Zorax. He trailed off, looking back at the lab in horror. Sarah understood immediately. There were still Zorax scientists in the lab, cut off from their life-supporting atmosphere. And no human could safely enter to help them. But as she watched, Zalek strode purposefully towards the lab entrance. "Wait," Sarah called out. "The atmosphere in there, it'll dissolve your armor, your very cells." Zalek turned to her, his eyes shimmering with determination. "And yet, if I do not go, my colleagues will die. Is this not what allies do for each other?" Before Sarah could respond, Zalek had sealed his armor and entered the lab. Through the observation window, Sarah watched in awe as the alien moved through the mist, his armor visibly deteriorating. He reached his trapped colleagues, helping them to their feet and guiding them towards the exit. As the last Zorax stumbled out of the lab, Zalek collapsed. His armor was almost completely gone, his silicon-based flesh exposed to the Earth's hostile atmosphere. Without thinking, Sarah rushed to his side. "We need a containment unit here now," she shouted, cradling Zalek's head. The alien's eyes flickered weakly. "Thank you, friend," his mental voice whispered before he lost consciousness. In the days that followed, as Zalek recovered in a specially designed medical pod, news of his heroic act spread. It became a symbol of the potential for true cooperation and sacrifice between humans and Zorax. Sarah visited Zalek as soon as he was well enough for visitors. As she approached his pod, she saw that his new armor was different. It shimmered with a pattern that seemed to mimic human skin. "A gift from your scientists," Zalek explained, his mental voice stronger now. "It provides better protection against your world's elements." Sarah smiled. "And our scientists are already talking about applications of your programmable matter technology for human space exploration. I guess we really do make a good team." Zalek's eyes shimmered with what Sarah now recognized as a smile. "Indeed, our differences make us stronger together than we ever could be apart." As she left the medical bay, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead would not be easy, but the alliance between humans and Zorax was growing stronger every day. Together, they were stepping into a future filled with possibilities neither species could have imagined alone. The universe, it seemed, was about to get a whole lot more interesting. A new era for humanity. 5 years had passed since the day the Zorax ships first appeared in Earth's skies. Sheriff Sarah Reeves, now Ambassador Sarah Reeves, stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, the first joint human-Zorax space station orbiting Earth. The blue marble of her home planet slowly rotated below, while the stars stretched out infinitely above. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Dr. Eliza Chen said, joining Sarah at the window. "Sometimes I still can't believe we're really up here." Sarah nodded, a smile playing on her lips. 5 years ago, I was breaking up bar fights in Millbrook. Now I'm helping negotiate interstellar treaties. Life takes some strange turns." Their reflective moment was interrupted by a soft chime. A holographic display materialized in front of them, showing the approach of a massive ship. It was unlike anything humans had built, its hull shimmering with the now familiar liquid metal of Zorax technology, but its lines were somehow both alien and human at the same time. "Right on schedule," Eliza said, checking her datapad. "The ASV Curiosity, first of the advanced Starship Venture class, a true melding of human and Zorax technology." As they watched, the ship gracefully docked with the station. Sarah felt a surge of pride. The Curiosity represented years of collaboration, struggles, and breakthroughs. It was a ship built not just for exploration, but for diplomacy. A vessel designed to carry both humans and Zorax across the stars, seeking out new civilizations. The airlock cycled, and a mixed group of humans and Zorax emerged. Leading them was a familiar figure, Zalek, his armor now bearing the insignia of a joint fleet commander. "Ambassador Reeves, Dr. Chen." Zalek greeted them, his mental voice warm. The shakedown cruise was a complete success. Curiosity is ready for her first official mission. Sarah grinned. That's fantastic news, Zalek. I knew you and your team could do it. As they moved to the conference room for the official debrief, Sarah marveled at how far they'd come. The early days of the Alliance had been rocky, filled with misunderstandings and setbacks. There had been extremists on both sides who opposed cooperation, fearing loss of identity or even extinction. But for every challenge, there had been a breakthrough. Zorak's programmable matter revolutionized human medicine and technology. Human adaptability and innovative thinking helped the Zoraks overcome limitations they'd struggled with for millennia. Together, they had achieved more in 5 years than either species had in centuries on their own. The conference room was a blend of human and Zorak's design, comfortable for both species. As the debriefing began, Sarah listened to reports of scientific discoveries, technological advancements, and plans for future expeditions. We've charted a course through a sector of space the Zoraks have never fully explored, one of the human astronauts explained, pointing to a star map. Our combined sensors should allow us to detect signs of life or civilization that neither species could have identified alone. A Zorak scientist added, and with our improved environmental systems, we can explore planets that would have been too hostile for either humans or Zoraks individually. As the presentation continued, Sarah felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Eliza, her eyes shining with excitement. Sarah, I've just received word from the genetics lab. We've done it. We've cracked the code for silicon-carbon hybrid organisms. Sarah's eyes widened. You mean? Eliza nodded. Yes, we can now create life forms that combine the best traits of humans and Zoraks. Beings that can survive in a wide range of environments, resistant to both our weaknesses. It's not just a scientific breakthrough. It's the next step in evolution. The implications were staggering. This could be the key to long-term space colonization, to adapting to worlds that would otherwise be uninhabitable. But it also raised profound ethical questions. Sarah made a mental note to convene a joint ethics committee as soon as possible. As the meeting concluded, Sarah found herself once again at the observation window, Zalek at her side. The Curiosity was preparing to depart, its engines glowing with a soft blue light. When I was a child, Zalek said, his mental voice contemplative, I dreamed of exploring the stars. But I never imagined I would do so alongside beings so different from myself. Beings who have become not just allies, but friends. Sarah smiled. I know what you mean. When I first encountered you in that cornfield, I was terrified. Now, I can't imagine facing the universe without you at our side. They'd watched in comfortable silence as the Curiosity disengaged from the station, its massive form gracefully turning towards open space. With a flash of light, it jumped to faster than light speed, disappearing into the cosmos. You know, Sarah said, there's an old human saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I think we've taken that step, Zalek. Together. Zalek's eyes shimmered with what Sarah now recognized as deep emotion. Indeed, my friend. And the journey ahead is grander than either of our species could have imagined. As they stood there, human and alien, watching the stars, Sarah felt a profound sense of hope. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and wonders they couldn't begin to fathom. But they would face it together, two species united by an unlikely alliance born of sweat, science, and the simple willingness to understand. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, and the greatest adventure was just beginning.